But I think that the value system of people there drove them to realize the importance of this work that they're doing with AlphaFold. And it is important for humanity, and it is important for the health broadly of people. They could have kept it all inside and used it to build therapeutic drug companies and make money from that. And I think the importance of this discovery and this capability was realized and is published for that very reason. There's a lot of work that DeepMind does to optimize ad targeting and ad spending and all this stuff, and they make tens of billions of dollars of incremental revenue for Google per year based on those capabilities. And then there are these things that benefit all of us. And by putting this out publicly, it's a great good for humanity. And they're making it freely available and searchable. And so I don't think that COVID kind of instigated this, because they've been working on this for a very long time, since before COVID. And this is a very hard biological problem that is key to understanding biology and how biology works. It's been going on for decades. They've unlocked it with software, and they're making it freely available. And there will be hundreds of drug companies that will now start because of what's in that database.
I mean, this is a mitzvah to society, to humanity.
Look, someone could make a copy of this thing and fork it and develop an entirely new model. I think that's what's incredible about software and digital technology, and also kind of, means that it's very hard to contain. Similar to like what we've seen in biology, ever since biology got digitized through DNA sequencing and the ability to kind of express molecules through gene editing. You can't control or contain the ability to do gene editing work at all, because everyone knows the code. Everyone can make CRISPR-Cas molecules. Everyone can make gene editing systems in any lab, anywhere. Once it was out, it was out. So I don't think you can contain it. I don't think that this idea that we can put in place some regulatory constraints and say it's illegal to do this, or try and create IP around it or protections around it, is realistic at this state. The power of the tool is so extraordinary. The extendability of the tools are so extraordinary. So the economic and the various incentives are there for other models to emerge, and whether they're directly copied from someone hacking into OpenAI servers and making a copy of that model, or whether they're open sourced, or whether that someone generates something that's 95% as good and then it forks and a whole new class of models emerge. I think this is it's, as Sachs pointed out, highlighting the kind of economic, market uprooting, social uprooting potential, and many models will start to kind of come to market. Yeah, I don't think it's as relevant that the open source model is published by China. I get that there may be security risks, that those can be estimated and addressed. I think on the three things that are worth highlighting on this issue, I'm very much aligned with Sachs and Chamath. And I think the three things are really around distillation. I don't think distillation is just about AI. Distillation is a process whereby you look at the end product that someone else has produced in thinking about and learning about how to engineer your product. It is a common technique that is used across every product category in every industry. One car maker will look at how the other car maker's car operates, and they will use that to help them design a better car. At Google, in the early days, we would submit millions of search queries to Yahoo and Microsoft search engines to see what the result sets were. And we would compare our results against their results as a way of improving our search engine rankings and our algorithm. It was a very common technique. It doesn't mean we were stealing their algorithm. We didn't go into their servers and steal their software. We looked at the output of their software and used that to improve our software. Yeah, so the other one was just on the free speech argument, which is, look, what is an open source model? And I think the audience needs to understand this if you're not from the software industry, but open source is a downloadable package of software. You can think about it as downloading a text, a book. You just got all the code. Once you get the code, you've got it on your computer. You don't have to be connected to the internet. You can just run it and use it. And I think part of the challenge that's going to be faced here, if there is any attempt at restricting open source, it's going to open a can of worms on how do you actually enforce restrictions on open source, because you're basically telling people once they've downloaded and gotten a copy of this free publicly available software, they're not allowed to use it. And that becomes a real challenge. I don't think we have a lot of great precedent for that. It's going to be very ugly to try and stop open source. I do think there's a question on like copyright action, but if there is, there's a legal due process to go through to make that case and stop that open source from being available. And then my third point is just open source is better for the world. To Chamath's point, this is 100 times cheaper. That is better for the industry, for enterprise. The beneficiaries are going to be the economy, the consumer. Rather than having to pay Netscape or Microsoft or Oracle for their server software, anyone with a computer could download the Apache software and make a web server and be on the internet and create a website. And what ended up happening is the value accrued to the internet. It didn't accrue to the small number of software providers that controlled the gate and the portal of the internet. Basically, everything got open sourced, and Google took off, and eBay took off, and Etsy, and Amazon, and all the millions of small websites, and all the millions of small businesses, and everyone that benefited from an openly accessible, open-sourced internet. Now, when we look at this analogy, the analogy here is if open source AI takes off, then all the worries that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and all the socialists are harping and larking about are not going to be the case anymore, because you're not going to see all the value of AI accrue to 2 or 3 or 4 companies and their small group of billionaire shareholders. What will happen is AI proliferates, and 1 million AI integrated enterprises all over the world will benefit. Everyone will benefit. The economy will grow. Jobs will be created. And AI becomes a power for good for creating an open economy. So I know that some people that are listening to this in the government and that are on the other side are going to say, but Chinese open source versus American open source, let it all proliferate. And frankly, if the Chinese are violating copyright, stealing software, go after them for that, put in place trade sanctions, do all the you can do to stop that from happening. But fundamentally, open source AI will transform the global economy, and it will ensure that the economic value of AI will diffuse to everyone and not be held captive by a small number.